Hello, welcome to this series sponsored by the Missouri Department of Education and the Council for Exceptional Children on high leverage practices for students with disabilities. This video is about high leverage practice number 15, use scaffolded supports. I am Michael Kennedy, professor of special education at the University of Virginia. Today's purpose is to talk about scaffolded supports. What are they? How do they work? How do they work alongside explicit instruction and other high leverage practices that we'll discuss in this series and in other professional development offerings as well. In addition to high leverage practice number 15, I have a surprise. I like to talk about high leverage practice number 13, which is to make adaptations to curriculum materials and tasks to address student goals. I really like to talk about these two HLPs together because if I'm making adaptations to students' instruction, which are changes, often those changes could include using scaffolds. And when I'm using scaffolds with students, I'm making adaptations. So I see these two things as very well linked. And when I'm thinking about how do I get to this convergence point of student success, I'm always, if you've heard me talk before, you know I'm a big believer and supporter of high leverage practice 16, use explicit instruction as my base model for instruction. But I use explicit instruction to teach kids how to use scaffolds. I teach kids how to use their adaptations. So these things are really well linked together. In addition to this, before I jump in and talk about high leverage practice 15, I really do think about the story of the high leverage practices and how they work together. In that before I'm in a position to identify what adaptations or what scaffolds are needed, I need to collaborate with my colleagues to really understand the students' needs from a range of disciplinary backgrounds, high leverage practice 1. I want to make sure that I'm collaborating with the family to understand the family's perspectives on the student needs, high leverage practice 3. I need to make decisions using data based on the best information that we have available so I know what scaffolds are even needed. Which ones make sense? That's high leverage practice 6. And then high leverage practices 11 and 12 to set long and short-term learning goals and to systematically design instruction to address those goals all lead to, some goals are going to require the use of these adaptations. Some parts of the systematically designed plan are going to involve the use of scaffolds. So I really like to think about these HLPs as being integrated, and it's never a situation where I'm really just thinking about one practice in isolation, because these HLPs don't really work that way. We really do want to think about them in a collaborative way. If you would like to hear my extended remarks on the collaboration HLPs and how they overlap with some of the content that's the focus of this session, please feel free to check out this link at your leisure. I also want to make sure everybody knows about highleveragepractices.org, the main website. On that site are all the videos that I've made for the high leverage practices, in addition to the leadership guides, where you can get more information about specific HLPs. So please look into those when the chance arises. I think about high leverage practices 13 and 15 as a sledgehammer of sorts that help me help my students remove barriers to their learning and their behavioral success. In another metaphor, they could help navigate the maze of learning because we have so many challenges placed in front of students, and so giving them the tools to break through the wall, navigate the maze, that's what we're all about. And even when I'm using the very best instruction. So if I'm providing explicit instruction as defined on this slide, and again, those of you who have heard me talk about this have, seen my hour-long or longer version of this. But even when the very best instruction is being provided to students, there's still going to be some students who struggle. That's what happens to students with disabilities, is it doesn't matter that they get the very best. They still need extra supports. That's how it goes. It's not a bad thing. It's a real thing. And when I'm providing scaffolded supports, that is part of that. So, what are scaffolds? Well, let's give a metaphor first. To build a new building from the ground up, or to clean a building that's already been built, the outside of it, I have to build scaffolds in order to do it. So the scaffolding allows the workers to access heights that otherwise they couldn't reach, so that they can do their work, right? I see scaffolded supports as that same thing. I can't get to the height that I need to do my job, which is to clean the windows or build something brand new. Scaffolds give me that tool to do it, because the counter blocks, the representation, the technology tools, there are lots and lots of different ways to think about it, but these scaffolds are tools that help complete a task in the same way that the scaffolding around the building allows me to complete a task. So the scaffolded supports for students, whether it's tech-based or not, live in the same way. They should cut across content areas, settings, academics, behavior, social skills, communication. All of these are needed scaffolds. Let's look at a quick sample video. A teacher's doing a 3rd grade mathematics lesson, just a few seconds of this, and watch how she's providing explicit instruction, high leverage practice 16. She's in a small group math setting, as you can see, high leverage practice 17. She's got engaging instruction going on, high leverage practice 18. She knew that these were the students who needed to be in this small group, thanks to high leverage practice 1 and 3. She's used data to make decisions about who should be in this group. And now she's going to provide this extra scaffold for the students by way of the tools as she's teaching. So let's have a look at this.
An example of our next activity. What we're going to be doing is I've provided a number line and a space for your equal groups. And there are some popsicle sticks. So I'm going to show you an example. What I'll do is I'll grab out a popsicle stick and it says 3 times 9. So on it says number sentence. I'll write 3 times 9. How can I write that in words if I'm doing a number line? Devin?
3 jumps of 9.
3 jumps of 9. So I'm just going to write it out real quickly on my board. I know my first jump is from 0 to 9, right? But maybe I don't remember what the next multiple is going to be, so I can count underneath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 18. And then I do happen to know the next one is 27. And so it shows, the model correctly shows that 3 times 7 is 29. I'll repeat this down below. And I'm going to say 3 times 9. How am I going to write this in words, Parker?
3 jumps of 9.
I'm going to do equal groups.
3 groups of 9.
There you go, 3 groups of 9. And then I'm going to draw my 3 groups, and how many are going to go in each?
9.
9, correct. All right, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Go. All right, Parker, you can grab one.
What did you see? So she's not only providing the modeling of how to do it, which was the opening part of that. But now the kids using the wipe off boards and the popsicle sticks under her watchful eye. This is a scaffold. She's providing scaffolded supports all wound up with these other HLPs as well. That's what I really like about this. Scaffolds can be graphic organizers as well. We often think about graphic organizers as scaffolds, Frere models in this example. Content enhancement routines, which were developed at the University of Kansas Center for Research on Learning. Using math manipulatives. This is one of the most classic examples of scaffolded supports. Use of calculators. These days, ChatGPT and other kinds of technology-based supports. But also, it doesn't have to be something you touch and use. You providing different levels of opportunities to respond for your kids, some easier, some harder questions, that can be a scaffold for them. You making adjustments to assignment length and assessment length can be a scaffold. Guided notes that you give to kids that have different amounts of content filled in or not can be a scaffold. Your job is to know what the students need and how much of a scaffold do they need. But in each case, whether it's math manipulatives, a graphic organizer, a guided note sheet, we have to explicitly teach students how to use these scaffolds. We can't just hand them the graphic organizer and say, and go. It doesn't work that way. Some are intuitive, and some kids do get it, but students with disabilities, English learners, others who struggle, we have to really plan a lesson that says this is how you use this tool. And I've got some video examples of this coming up in this video. I want to use explicit instruction so that I do the I do, we do, you do sequence that I've yelled at you about before for explicit instruction. But remember, I can't just model once. I don't do guided practice just once, and I don't do independent practice just once. I model again, I model a third time. Now we do guided practice. Let's do some more guided practice. Let's do a third round of guided practice. And then you can try it yourself with a lot of support from me and then less support from me. Let's have a look at this lesson. I filmed this just recently, special for this series, and I want you to think about what kind of explicit instruction and high quality practices is she using, but then focus on this is a lesson specifically taught so that she is using scaffolds and teaching the kids how to use scaffolds. Let's have a look.
About that main idea. All right, so when we think of main idea, I want you to think of a table. So at the top of the table, it's called a tabletop, and this is going to represent our main idea. It's going to represent what our text is mostly about. Well, a table has different legs, usually 3 or more, and these are going to be our supporting details or our key details. They hold up our main idea, or they prove that our text is about whatever we think our main idea is. So, take a little picture of this table in your mind. We're going to keep this table in our mind, and we're going to use a graphic organizer that sort of looks like this table. At the top, it's like our tabletop. This is where we're going to put our main idea, what our text is mostly about. And underneath, we're going to have our details, which are the legs of our table. So we're going to be putting the proof in here about our main idea. Thumbs up, this is making sense so far. Fabulous. On the board right now, I have 3 details, 3 pictures. So I'm going to be thinking about what these details or these pictures, how they are related, what they have in common. And I'm going to come up with a main idea, what these are all mostly about. So I me, that's a bear hibernating. I see some birds migrating. And then I see a rabbit or a hare that's fur has turned white. And I know that all of these pictures are about animals and their adaptations and what they do in winter. So do you think it's safe to say that all of these pictures have to do with animals adapting in winter?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be my main idea. Animals adapt in different ways. When do they adapt in different ways? What did I say? In winter. So this is my main idea, and my legs of my table are all proving that animals adapt in different ways. So I now just tried it with the pictures. I'm going to give you a chance to try it.
So what did you notice? She's got great modeling here, where she's thinking aloud and demonstrating within a specific lesson about how to use this graphic organizer scaffold. Now in this next segment of the lesson, watch how she moves into the guided practice phase where the kids get their first chance to get their hands onto the graphic organizer. But then note she returns to modeling again before the guided practice comes. So we'll have a look at this.
I'm going to give you a chance to try it. So take a look at these three details. Think about how they're related, what is their connection, and if we had to decide what they were all about. Come and share with your neighbor. What are you thinking? Look at the main things people can do in the water. All right, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Readers, who has a main idea that we can put at the top of our organizer that all of these details support or proves? Jameson, what do you think is the main idea?
Fun things to do in the water.
Yeah, so there are lots of fun things to do in the water. So if that's our main idea, then all of these details prove or support that. So if there are lots of fun things to do in the water, what can somebody do in the water? Layla? Snorkel. What else, Aviva?
Surf.
Surf. Tell me one more, Jackson. Oh, our board. What else? What other details show us that there are lots of fun things to do in the water?
You can go fishing on
You can go fishing on
a boat.
a boat. Are there other things that could be on this graphic organizer? Who has another idea that could be on this that's not here? Oscar.
Boogie boarding.
Maybe boogie boarding. Aviva.
Swimming.
Swimming. So all of those could be a detail that supports our main idea. I know there's more, but we're going to save it for now. Now we're going to kind of look at it differently. So I'm thinking of the main idea. Right now our main idea is one person can make a difference in their local or global community. This reminds us of what we learned in reading the last 3 weeks. This is our main idea. So I need to think about what details support that or prove that one person can make a difference in their local or global community. I'm going to do the first detail. So I'm thinking that Isatu Cisse, do you guys remember her?
Yeah.
Isatu Cisse recycled all of their garbage.
All right, so continuing with this outstanding example of explicit modeling and use of guided practice, she's using this scaffold brilliantly because she's explicitly teaching the kids how to use it, what it's for, under what circumstances, and she's using different examples too. So the first time they had to write the main idea, now they've got the main idea and they've got to come up with the the examples. This is exactly how you do it. I just love these clips. I hope you did too. So once the students have received high quality instruction with chances to practice and receive feedback, then your choices open up for how these scaffolds can be used. Let's say just a couple words about high leverage practice 13 to make adaptations to curriculum materials. So you've already heard me say that adaptations are a change, and that they help kids work around a specific challenge that they have because of their disability. Key adaptations are simplifying task directions, altering the difficulty of material, altering the amount of material, highlighting relevant material, and using combinations of adaptations. Simplifying directions is pretty straightforward. So you take a look at the definition that you're giving, or not just the definition, the directions you're giving to kids, and look at the vocabulary, look at the sentence complexity, and figure out ways to simplify them. A lot of teachers will use visual aids to help illustrate each step, to help students simplify the task. Here's an example. Okay, so instead of writing a 500-word essay about your summer vacation, which could be very difficult for some students, provide to them a step-by-step guide with visuals so they understand the introduction, body, and conclusion requirements. Solve a complex word problem. So instead, let's break into smaller steps and use concrete objects or visual aids to represent for kids. To alter the difficulty of material. Okay, so a lot of kids would have trouble reading, just being told, go read the book. But some students require a modified version of the same story with simplified language and shorter sentences. They can also be given visuals to help aid their comprehension. The original task is to solve advanced algebraic equations. So the adaptation could be basic problems related to the same concept. Now we can't always hide from this, the complexity based on the standards and curriculum. But at first exposure, it can be a really important idea to support scaffolds and adaptations for kids. Making the adaptation to alter the amount of material. So instead of 16 problems, we give them 8. Instead of 8, we give 4. Okay, the important thing is that they're able to do the problem, not necessarily how many of the problems do they have the stamina to do. And that can go for reading or mathematics or writing or anything else that they might be struggling with. We want to, highlight relevant material for students. Okay, so what is the main idea within each, the main thing I'm teaching about, and how do we make that obvious for kids to really scaffold for them? This is where I need your eyes. This is where I need you to be paying the most attention. So there's no mistake on what you're looking for and what information they're responsible for. I also want to use combinations of adaptations. What that means is thinking about everything we've said so far from this list. So we're going to simplify directions. We can alter what they're responsible for. We can alter not just how much of it, but how hard it is. We're going to make signals for what's relevant. And then really, the big thing that you can do is put it all together so that kids have options and don't get overwhelmed as they are taking on challenging tasks that they might just say, that's too much, I don't know how to do that, I don't even know where to start. Adaptations help answer those questions. I also encourage you within High Leverage Practice 13 to break away from only considering accommodations and modifications that come on pre-written lists from websites and other IEP support programs that we buy, the district buys for us. We want to be creative and think about what adaptations are needed given data, what adaptations are needed given the cross reference of data and student individualized needs and the contours of the curriculum. There's also always a risk. I've certainly been guilty of this myself in my 9 years of classroom teaching and even at the university. As a special education teacher, somebody asks us for help. We're like, really? Okay. And I end up doing it for them. My own child has figured that out, that if they ask for help, I'm going to end up doing it for them. It's very clever, very clever. And I need to stop doing it, as you might as well. We really want to make sure that they get the help they need, but not too much. The final piece of this is to really make sure that what do kids need given what we're teaching and their uniqueness. That's the whole ball game of figuring out adaptations and scaffolds to put in the way of kids. But again, I cannot do this if I don't use the combination of high leverage practices that I already talked about. I want to use this example for the remainder and second half of this session on scaffolds. So one of the things that we often do for our teachers is we give them skinny IEPs is usually the name of it. And what the purpose is we provide this information so teachers have it at their doorstep. Okay, so they've got information about their student accommodations, what kind of instruction works well for them, their strengths, their goals, their needs. If I create infographics like this and give it to students, that's going to help me and my teaching staff keep the eye on the ball for what is super needed for them. So here's an example. Steve he's 8 years old, 3rd grade, learning disability in the areas of reading comprehension and mathematics computation. He has a lot of friends. He plays on baseball team, plays with Legos. He's creative and kind. He likes going to see local college and pro teams play. And of course, who doesn't like the rolls at the Texas Roadhouse? But his needs are attention, staying on task, reading with sustained fluency, vocabulary, memorizing math facts, and solving complex word problems. If I know just this information, I can begin thinking about scaffolds and adaptations that are going to support Steve. And that's the mindset I want you to give to the teachers and staff that you're working with, is what do we have for documented needs? And then let's figure out, okay, what do we know how to do, evidence-based practice and high leverage practice wise, to support kids like this that have trouble memorizing math facts, for example. On the infographic, I have access to his goals, I have access to his accommodations, and relevant assessment data. So again, for each of these, I can think about, here's the challenges, so what are the possibilities for adaptations and scaffolds that are going to make a difference for these kids? In other words, if Steve struggles with staying on task, what kinds of scaffolds and adaptations can I make that are known to be effective for kids that have a disability or a learning challenge of that sort? Giving clear directions, brain breaks, fidgets, seating options, incorporating student interests. Here's an example video from kindergarten.
All right, so here we go. First, let's be the rabbit. Ready, go. Ice.
Ice, ice.
Everybody, let's do it again. Ready, go. Ice. All right, let's stretch it out like a turtle. Ice. Let's count the sounds we just heard. Ice. Two. So point where you would put it. Put it right there. Okay, cool. All right, let's do this again. Rabbit. Feet. Cool. Let's stretch it out like a turtle. Eat. How many did we do? Let's try it again. Eat. Three. Put it. Oh, you all are all in good agreement. All right. I think you are doing so well. You can put a turtle in one hand. Okay, turtle puppet in one hand, and then be sure to have your fingers in the other hand so you can say how many sounds you hear. Okay.
More high quality explicit instruction provided by our colleague, but the kids are with these young kids, they've got attention issues as we noted in the infographic. So the use of lots of chances to respond to prompts, the cutesy turtles, and the feedback are providing the scaffolds that these cute young kids need to help be successful. What about reading with sustained fluency? How do I support a kid if I know that that's a need of theirs? Well, I look at the evidence-based practices for scaffolding reading development with adapted texts, partner reading, using native language when appropriate. In each instance, I'm able to think about ways that can help support student learning using specific scaffolds, like you'll see in this also first grade reading lesson.
These vowels can do what? What have we learned they can already
Say
do?
their name.
Well, what have we already learned they can do?
Say their name
Well-
and
Make a,
sound.
what kind of sound?
Ah.
What do we call those? What do we call those? Short vowels, yes. Did you hear what he said?
Short vowels.
Good job, Luca. Let's give Luca a roller coaster woo. Click, 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 click. Woo! Good job, Luca. They can usually make short vowel sounds. Let's do that. Let's do our motions with our short vowels. Lay your marker on your lap a minute. All right, you ready? Short vowel A says ah. Short vowel E says eh. Short vowel I says eh. Short vowel O says ah. And short vowel U says ugh. We also know that these vowels can make a long sound, which means what, Harmony?
Say their
They
name.
can say their name. Good job, Harmony. You're exactly right. Short vowels say ah, and long vowels say their name. Now,
I-E-I-O-U.
there you go. That's exactly what they say. Good girl. All right, we're going to start with the word mad. Would you?
More use of high quality explicit instruction, more use of high quality scaffolds with her prompts, with her feedback, with the whiteboards. There's all kinds of high quality instruction going on there and overlapping HLPs. How about vocabulary? What do we do for that? There's lots of high quality scaffolds available for supporting vocabulary learning. In each instance, I can think about, oh, I should use images. I should provide lots of cues to scaffold student success. I should make sure things are relevant. I want to use a range of examples. I can also use graphic organizers like Frere models. I can fill this out myself for students that struggle. I can give this to students to fill out themselves so that they would be able to successfully implement as well. Memorizing math facts. Okay, we do all kinds of things like flashcards and foldables to help scaffold student success. And here is a sample, a student with more extensive support needs doing a one-on-one lesson with now Dr. Alexandra Rains This is when she was a teacher working with this young student. Check this out.
Let's start by writing our name. Please, I'll take those. Thank you.
No.
Yes, you are. Well, I'm going to wait until you're ready. Okay, so you wrote your name. The first problem, could you read it to me, please?
That with
2 plus 2. Okay. So I'm going to write 2 plus. Oh, it's funny. I'm gonna get that wrong. 2 plus 2 equals. Good job. So the first thing you need to do is what?
Two.
It is
Two, two, two. Three. Four. Two.
good job. So put 2 in your first box, please.
Yellow.
Whatever color you like.
Red.
Awesome. Now count your dots. What's the answer? 4. Fantastic. 3.
That's how you use scaffolds. She's knows how to use them. We've taught how they work, and the student is able to do a challenging task for her that perhaps she could not do without the scaffold that was provided. Here's an older example, upper elementary, using mathematics with counting blocks. Same idea, but with more sophisticated topics, but it's the same concept.
Okay, what our goal is today, boys and girls, and what we're going to work on is transferring our base 10 models into numeric numbers and then solving that problem, okay? So you understand exactly what a base 10 model represents as far as a numeric number, okay? All right, so let's look today. I'm going to put a number up here, and I want you to model my number. And then we're going to solve the problem from there. So I have, here's my number.
Students have received a lesson on how to use the scaffolds. Now they're using them to complete a task that would be difficult to use. Remember my opening metaphor? We use the scaffolding around the building we put up the scaffold first, and then we build the building behind it. Or for students that already have a building existing, but that's dirty, it needs to be cleaned up, I put up the scaffold so I can do that maintenance. For some of these kids, they just need maintenance, and the scaffold helps with that maintenance. For other kids, the scaffold is needed to build the new structures, to stick with the metaphor. All right, and then the final one was solving math or one-step word problems. I've got one last video to show.
Together. I'll read it aloud and I want you to follow along with me. Mary needed 100 apples for her pantry. She had 35 apples. How many more apples does she need? So first, let's figure out what is the problem asking us to do. Is the problem asking us to subtract or add?
Subtract.
How did you know we had to subtract?
Because how many more apples does she need?
That's a good clue to use, Molly. So we're going to have to set up a subtraction problem. So do you know how to set it up, or would you like a little help?
I can do it.
Great, I loved how you set that problem up. So let's start on this side of the problem, Molly. What are we going to have to do?
Borrow.
Yes, this number's too small, so let's get some blocks. And I know we're gonna start off with 10 blocks.
It's not only that she's using the blocks. Scaffolds doesn't mean automatically that it's just the tangible. Her questioning and the feedback that she delivered is the scaffold that was modeled here. All right, so let's wrap up this video. Remember, using data to determine which scaffolds are needed is really, really important. It's one of the most important things, because otherwise I'm just guessing what might be needed and what might make sense for students. I want to pay careful attention to the standards, to the lesson requirements, and cross-reference with students' individualized needs to make good hypotheses about where the scaffolds or adaptations could be needed. I want to remember that so many students with disabilities struggle to stay on task. They struggle with motivation because they struggle academically. If I have a student who is struggling academically, over time, those struggles add, and they end up frustrated and not being willing to give their best effort. But if I give them tools, whether it's my questioning techniques or a tangible item like a calculator, if I can permit them to be more successful thanks to the tool, that's going to have a positive impact on motivation and engagement, which is HLP 18. Remember that students with disabilities often need accommodations, modifications, scaffolds, but they don't always. And so I need to be judicious and thoughtful and planful about when, who, and how much of each scaffold is needed. I don't want to think that the scaffold or the adaptation is needed and will be used in perpetuity. I don't really think that's the way it works. I'm really comfortable giving more responsibility to students and see how they do. And then if they're struggling without the scaffold, there's my evidence to say I need to do more. But if they're able to do the task without the scaffold, that's ultimately what we want, right? Some students have disabilities so significant, they're always going to need the scaffold, but some will outgrow them. We need to plan for in-the-moment changes. So I want to think about, how can I support students no matter what? This is why I need to be constantly collecting data, doing decisions that will help my students succeed, so the right scaffolds can be selected. And as a result of that, I need to be documenting formal and informal methods. And you can see in our assessment videos from the HLP series good ways on how to do this, but look at HLPs 4, 5, and 6 for sure. I already talked about this, to pull away with scaffolds when you think they're not needed. but always be ready to reinsert in case they do. And then finally, your patience. You know, some things take time, and that what I mean here is it takes time for kids to learn how to use these scaffolds. It's not going to be automatic and easy. So you really have to think about it. All right, thank you for tuning in to this video on High Leverage Practice 15 using scaffolds. I hope it was useful to you. Please email me, that's an mjk3p@virginia.edu if you have any questions. But otherwise, keep tuning into this series, and I'll hope to talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.